We have total control of the Strait of Hormuz, as you know, with our blockade. The blockade's been 100% effective. Nobody's been able to get through. It's like a steel wall. It's our Navy. We have the greatest military anywhere in the world. We wiped out their Navy. We not wiped out their air. I think they're down to about, I would say we knocked out 85% of their missile capacity.
Something like 26 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
They paid the toll.
Yes.
The Iranians escorted them. What's he talking about? Yeah, a friend of mine who is more imaginative than I am said, Doug, Trump was checked into the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't check out, and he's stuck. I think that's true. Since the CIA decided to leak the truth to the New York Times, and we discovered that 90% of the capability was still intact, that contrary to popular belief, the real capability that threatened the region and threatens us and threatens Israel at this point is largely undamaged.
Do the Americans understand that, does the Pentagon understand that decapitation strikes and air alone will not produce a successful achievement of their military objectives? We've been through this for weeks now.
What if I told you the President of the United States just stood in front of the cameras and claimed total control of the Strait of Hormuz? On the exact same day, Iran was escorting ships through it and charging $2 million a transit. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, retired Army colonel, former senior advisor to the acting Secretary of Defense, just laid out a reality that is completely at odds with the official story. Here's what he actually found. When he looked at the data, Trump says 85% of Iran's missiles are gone. His own CIA leaked to the New York Times that 90% of Iran's missile launch sites are still operational. Trump says the strait is a steel wall. The IRGC reported coordinating 26 vessel transits the day before this conversation. Trump says Iran's air force is wiped out. And China just finalized a deal to deliver supersonic anti-ship missiles to Iran that can reach US Navy warships 180 miles offshore. And then there's what Macgregor calls the Hotel California problem. Trump checked in, he can't check out. Whatever happens next is the last phase. There's a lot the nightly news isn't showing you, so let's see. Let's start with the military picture, because the gap between public claims and the actual intelligence is the foundation of everything Macgregor says here.
Well, I think it is stronger militarily, yes. I know this is disappointing to many people. And a lot of people have wanted desperately to believe whatever President Trump said, but since the CIA decided to leak the truth to the New York Times, and we discovered that 90% of the capability was still intact, that contrary to popular belief, regardless of whatever thousands of targets were struck, the real capability that threatened the region and threatens us and threatens Israel at this point is largely undamaged. I think that's probably true. Now, there is a lot of information out there. Some of it's open source, some of it is not. That's suggesting that both the Russians and the Chinese have resupplied and replenished many stocks of missiles and equipment and have added some new equipment, some new radars with much greater range that can be integrated into a much more effective air and missile defense system.
The CIA assessment was reported by the New York Times on May 13th. Iran has restored access to 30 of 33 missile sites it controls along the Strait of Hormuz. 90% of underground launchers remain operational. When the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was asked directly in a Senate hearing whether this contradicted Trump's public claims, he declined to answer. Battle damage assessment matters are classified, he said. That's the military's version of no comment. The Russian and Chinese resupply Macgregor mentions is documented. China is close to finalizing a deal for CM-302 supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles for Iran. That's coming in the next clip.
There's some new cruise missiles from the Chinese. I'm sure others have talked about this, that have a range of at least 300 kilometers, which means they can reach out 180 to 200 miles offshore. And they are absolutely designed to fly at nearly hypersonic speed or above and ultimately sink capital ships. So I think they are stronger at this point. They're better equipped. And each time, you've got to give it to the Iranians on this point. Their engineering skills are excellent. The Israelis have always said that, and they're right. But more important, after each involvement in war with with Israel and us, first the 12-day episode, then the 3+ week episode, they have learned very, very carefully what they needed to do in the future. And they have shown up better prepared, more lethal, more capable.
The specific missile Macgregor is describing is the CM-302, China's export variant on the YJ-12 Eagle strike. Reuters reported on February 24th that Iran was close to finalizing the purchase, confirmed by 6 sources. Range 290 kilometers, approximately 180 miles. It flies low and fast, supersonic, sea-skimming, specifically designed to compress the reaction time of US Navy ship defenses. Dr. Alessandro Arduino at the Royal United Services Institute described it as a game-changer missile system. What that means in practice, US aircraft carriers operating anywhere near the Persian Gulf are now potentially within reach of a weapon that was designed specifically to sink them, a weapon Iran didn't have when the war started. Welcome back to ARM Geopolitics. I'm Aaron Johnson. On this channel, we don't just cover the news, we cut through the noise, dominate the narrative, and give you the analysis mainstream media is too scared to run. Vigilance is our shield, truth is our weapon. Let's get into it. The centerpiece of this conversation, Trump speaking, then Macgregor reacting. Watch the gap.
We have total control of the Strait of Hormuz, as you know, with our blockade. The blockade's been 100% effective. Nobody's been able to get through. It's like a steel wall. It's our Navy. We have the greatest military anywhere in the world. We wiped out their Navy. We not wiped out their air. I think they're down to about, I would say we knocked out 85% of their missile capacity. It's very hard for them now to build missiles, to build drones.
Well, of course he is. We know that yesterday, I think it was something like 26 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
They paid the toll.
Yes.
The Iranians escorted them. What's he talking about? I mean, I guess they failed to keep him up to date. And this blockade, he called it off. He suspended it, remember?
Yeah. Here's Chris, can you put that full screen up again? Here's what the reporter asked him that provoked that response. CNN report, Iran rebuilding military industrial base faster than expected, already producing drones, according to U.S. intel. You referenced this earlier. It's a CIA leak.
Yes. I don't know if people are failing to keep him up to date, or he simply chooses to believe as he wishes and dismisses reports that don't align with his expectation. I mean, both are possible. I don't know the answer, but at this point, if he keeps telling people over and over and over again, we destroyed their Air Force, and they had practically none, and we destroyed their Navy, which amounted to 7 frigates and a few small boats, I think they're probably going to start throwing things at him.
Let's go through this specifically. Total control, steel wall, nobody gets through. The IRGC announced May 20th that it coordinated transit for 26 vessels in the previous 24 hours. Iran has been running what Lloyd's List calls a toll booth system since mid-March. Ships pay up to $2 million for a clearance code, then an Iranian naval escort guides them through Iranian territorial waters. The historical transit rate through Hormuz is 138 vessels every 24 hours. Iran controls who passes now, not the US Navy. 85% of missile capacity destroyed. Trump's own CIA told the New York Times on May 13th that Iran has restored access to 30 of 33 missile sites and 90% of underground launchers remain operational. Trump's claimed percentages have ranged from 60% to 90% to 80 to 85% across different days. The only consistent number from an independent source is the CIA's, roughly 90% still operational. The reporter's question that preceded Trump's response was about CIA intelligence showing Iran is rebuilding faster than expected and already producing drones again. Trump's answer described a version of the war that directly contradicts his own intelligence community. Macgregor's read, either people aren't briefing him or he knows and ignores it. Both scenarios are serious problems for anyone trying to understand where this actually goes next. Macgregor has a name for Trump's strategic situation right now, and it's one you already know.
Trump still has not found an off-ramp. He's still frantically looking for one. And his last resort will be brute force.
Yes. Well, I think that's inevitably the case. You escalate until you can't anymore. That it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. And then you want to do one of two things. You give up and go home, or you take a break and try to do it again. I don't think we'll get a chance to do it again. So whatever happens this time around will be the last phase. Yeah, a friend of mine who is more imaginative than I am said, Doug, Trump is checked into the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't check out. And he's stuck. I think that's true. And I'm not sure that he's going to get what he wants from the Iranians, because what he's really looking for is something he can point to that demonstrates he's winning. I don't think that's going to happen.
Hotel California, as a strategic frame, is more precise than it sounds. The song is about a place you enter voluntarily, find you cannot leave, and eventually stop trying. Macgregor's version, Trump entered this war expecting the regime to fall, the strait to open, a quick victory. None of that happened. Now every option either deepens the problem or requires publicly acknowledging the problem exists. So going back to bombing, Macgregor says whatever comes next is the last phase. Iran is better equipped. China just added ship-killing missiles. Russia and China both resupplied. He expects the damage on all sides to be much worse than the first round. And destroying Gulf energy infrastructure in the process would trigger what multiple analysts are calling a global depression, not a recession. Negotiating a deal on Iran's terms? Politically toxic domestically. Netanyahu can restart hostilities from Israel's side the moment Trump agrees to anything. Macgregor explicitly raised this in the opening segment of the conversation. Staying in place, the strait remains restricted. The global economy keeps bleeding, midterms approaching. 3 doors, all of them bad. That's why it's the hotel. And this is the argument Macgregor has been building towards, that the entire military strategy in the Persian Gulf was misconceived from the start.
Whenever you build military, no matter how much money you spend, your force can only do so much. In other words, you can't build something that can go everywhere, anytime, and suddenly defeat everyone. This sort of World War II style force structure with updated weaponry and some new technology really is not the right force to deal with what's going on in the Persian Gulf. It never was. Now, the British, as we've discussed before, made this terrible mistake in 1915. They ended up putting over 500,000 troops into the Dardanelles, the strait. They failed miserably in the face of 350,000 Turks. The Turks drove them away. They finally gave up at the wrong force for the wrong mission in the wrong place. That's what we've done. Doesn't mean that our military power is weak or incapable, or we don't have good people manning it. But we need to come to terms with this reality. Most important, President Trump does.
The Dardanelles, Gallipoli, it's one of the most studied strategic failures in modern military history. Britain and its allies committed over 500,000 troops to force open the strait connecting the Mediterranean to the Black Sea in 1915. The Ottoman defenders held the terrain advantage and the interior lines. After 8 months of catastrophic losses, the allies withdrew. The campaign was driven by the logic that naval power plus an amphibious landing could force a geographic choke point. Same logic being applied to Hormuz a century later. Macgregor's point isn't that the US military is incompetent. It's that it's optimized for a different kind of war. Large-scale combined arms conflict in open terrain, high-altitude strategic bombing, global power projection. A confined sea lane controlled by a nation with dispersed coastal missiles. Drone swarms, and now Chinese ship killers is not that terrain. He also mentions Kosovo in 1999 in this segment. 78 days of airstrikes that didn't end that war. What ended it was a back-channel trip to Moscow and Russia telling Serbia it was cutting off support. The air campaign didn't produce the result, but the Air Force claimed the credit. That's the recurring pattern Macgregor is describing. Now, the video Macgregor is reacting to, the actual CENTCOM commander, Admiral Brad Cooper, in front of Congress. Watch what happens when two veteran lawmakers ask him basic questions.
For 50 years, the Navy has kept sea lanes open and free. Under every previous president, the Strait of Hormuz has been open. So why is it closed under your watch? Admiral Cooper, you keep using the term significantly degraded. Last summer, we were told that Iran's nuclear weapons program was obliterated. Can you clarify the distinction between obliterated and significantly degraded?
Congressman, again, I think appropriate to talk about anything regarding the Iranian nuclear program.
No, I'm not asking you to talk about the Iran nuclear program. I'm asking you to talk about English language. What's the difference between obliterated and significantly degraded? Are they the same?
This is an old problem, and that is that the 4 stars, whether they intended or not, and that's debatable, end up becoming identified with the political figures that appointed them. Lyndon Johnson made a habit of appearing in public with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He would stand there next to Earl Wheeler and make announcements, and Earl Wheeler's job was to essentially legitimate whatever LBJ said. Kennedy started this when he appeared in public with the chairman, who was Maxwell Taylor. And they became so close that Maxwell Taylor ended up naming some of his children after the Kennedys. You know, it's a bad thing. I mean, there has to be a clear, unambiguous divide between the military and the civilian leadership. And the military has the obligation to be as truthful as possible whenever they're asked anything. And, when he was asked, was this part of the plan? He should have said, no, sir. Well, were you aware that this could have happened? Was that considered? Now, I don't know the answer or not, but I suspect it probably was, Judge. And he could have said, yes, sir, it was considered. And then he might have followed on. He said, well, did anyone plan on what ultimately happened or consider those possibilities? We did, but perhaps we didn't consider them carefully enough, in which case that's, my fault. The failure to look through this planning and to examine all of the assumptions. Nobody wants to go there. The last man who went there and did that sort of thing, frankly, in public, was George Marshall. And Marshall was not a brilliant man, and he was not a perfect man, and he would be the first to say that. But he was scrupulously honest. And I think before he died, he said, when I reflect on all the times that I was asked questions and answered them, I think I inadvertently misled once, and I may have lied once. Well, given the fact that he was chief of staff during the largest war in human history, that's a pretty damn good record. We don't think in those terms. So Cooper is probably the average officer, but he's being promoted to 4 stars and installed in CENTCOM just as Kurilla was. And if you go and look at General Kurilla was step and fetch it for Mr. Netanyahu. He was always on the doorstep, always ready to be there for Mr. Netanyahu. He was intimately involved with everything the Israelis were doing. And I think Admiral Cooper was told, you need to do the same thing. And he's done it. I think it's catastrophic. And now Kurilla has retired, and he's in a private equity firm, and he's being rewarded for his commitment and service to the war against Iran. This is what Eisenhower warned everybody about, as you know. And I'm afraid it's come full circle. So the more I look at all of this stuff, and people ask me all the time, what do you think we should do? I said, I think we're going to have to go through the senior ranks and just thank everybody for their interest in national defense and send them away and start over.
2 basic questions. Neither answered. Why is the strait closed under your watch? The most fundamental question about CENTCOM's core mission in the region. Cooper did not answer it. What's the difference between obliterated and significantly degraded? A senior military officer asked to explain his own language. Also did not answer. Macgregor's contrast with George Marshall Army Chief of Staff through the largest war in human history, is precise. Marshall refused to let FDR call him by his first name in a room full of people. Macgregor says Marshall reflected before he died that he had inadvertently misled Congress once and possibly lied once across his entire tenure during World War II. That's the standard he's holding up. The Eisenhower warning Macgregor cites in the farewell address, January 1961. Military-industrial complex is the phrase everybody knows. Less quoted is what follows. Eisenhower warned that public policy could itself become captive to a scientific technological elite, and that the same institutional pressures that corrupt industry can corrupt military leadership. Macgregor applies it directly. Kurilla was rewarded for institutional loyalty during the war, not for telling hard truths. Cooper is following the same track. The system trains for compliance, not candor, and the price is the testimony you just watched. We need to talk about the massive civil war happening inside our own national security machine. The CIA is out here leaking intel reports to the media that make the administration's public statements look completely out of touch. To make it weirder, when Congress put a general on the spot to get a straight answer, he flat out clammed up. So what's the actual play here? Is the intelligence community locking the president out of his own data? Or does the White House know the truth and they're just hoping we won't notice the contradiction? Both options are a massive problem, and they change the math on what happens next. Drop your read on this in the comments below. I'm tracking the comments because I want to see how you guys are scoring this. If you think this kind of deep dive needs to be seen by more people, instead of getting buried under the usual feed of noise, do me a favor, share it around. It takes you guys to actually beat the algorithm. This is ARM Geopolitics. I'm Aaron Johnson. Stay sharp, stay informed, and never stop questioning. I'll see you in the next one.